Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. Lots to cover tonight. Some big chunks of what we're doing and less of what they're doing will be the theme for tonight's show, including a mind-bending ponder near the end. Right, I have detected quite a lot of members feeling down, a bit depressed, dispirited and disenfranchised this past week, and this was expected in many ways, and that caused another member who has been financially supported recently by the TPC to walk away from the group. And that's the fifth person this year who has been helped by the TPC or me privately that have walked away from our group. Some of them more high profile than others, but the feeling remains the same in effect. Why do people do that to the very few who will help or support them? Is that not a selfish act to do? And is selfishness part of our overall problem we face on this planet? The whole down issues in our group was the fact that for many, their politician lost last week. Regardless of what unfolds in the coming days, weeks or months, Americans and their psyche don't like to be losers. But you have to understand, it is not you that lost. It was Trump. What happened to observe, not absorb? It's not like you were not warned about it in this show. In fact, several times over the past few months. But what does it really change? What good has Trump really done for the people over the past 4 years compared to what he could have done? Is it really that much different on a personal or collective level from the Obama reign? Well, the answer is no. No matter how many times you convince yourself otherwise, the answer is no for we the people. And in overview, and this show and host has supported both of these people only to be let down badly by them, both Trump and the trustee. In essence, have become saviour programs. Both promising various things, both failed to deliver. Although the trustee can at least say she did try. And at this point, I'm not sure how much Trump really did try for we the people. He certainly failed Kim and her team, and also the help that I gave him via Kim also. But if you can't look after your friends and people who are willing to support you, what do we have left? And that is something we all have to address. Politics is theatre. The president is not a government position. Trump 18 months ago was chasing the title King of the World with clowns in Russia until they picked Macron. Trump is now chasing King of America with clowns. Trump could send our money to Israel, but not to the American people, and the list goes on. The trustee states Trump is now back on board and chasing the American election again. But there's two things about that. One, can we trust someone who flip-flops that easily between the Black Sun and King titles, and when it goes wrong, he's back with the people again? And two, the trustees' predictions have hardly been too reliable this year, have they? And people can take that as a stab, but not when it's a fact. It's not, no matter which way you look at it. Why should we believe it that Trump is back on track? Because this is the third time this year she wrote Trump off in comments publicly, 2 others in private, and the third time she stated now he's back on board. And at which point does it become a drama-based and energy-based harvesting system, this back and forth of Trump with us and Trump's not with us, is not helping anyone, least of all the trustee. But in essence, she has no option to do the dance with the devil, so to speak. We the people don't have to. Trump on and off has all the looks of the fishing technique to keep the illusion going, that you don't see the hook until it's too late. That we had a president for and by the people, and after 4 years and much work on my part, much more work on Kim's part, at which point do we say enough is enough? Why do we have Biden? Maybe because it's what we deserve. We sat back and waited again for Trump and the trustee instead of doing something ourselves. And it's humanity's perennial Achilles heel. To take the easier saviour path of others fixing things for them instead of taking the shorter path of fixing things themselves. But, some will say, Thomas, it'll take years to build the TPC. How is that a shorter path? Because you've waited years for several other programs to fix things for you via the alt media, and not one has come to fruition. 25 years of alt media, and every weight club worked only for the clowns. Trump, it appears at this point, became another weight club along with Q, and like all others, it never delivered. Those are the facts. We don't have to like them, but those are the actual facts. And we've all bought into weight clubs and money programs, all of which is a handout. And what we haven't built is our own alternative, or done a hand-up version, which requires the participation of you all, not throw it onto me or Kim or anybody else. So yes, building a viable, cohesive alternative of for and by the people is now the only solution. And if certain people want to reject that because it's not their idea, their group, their name, to those people, you are part of the problem. And you do the clown's bidding for them. And why humanity has always failed. Clowns build secret groups and all agree to the plan. And they've been successful at it. Why? Because they work together. We the people set up rival groups, steal the ideas and members from a previous group and try to reinvent the wheel. There is your difference. One works together, one divides. And I would like to see a lot of effort on behalf of all of our members to make this work. We have to work harder than clowns to get this going. And I give a lot of my time to help you all, and I'm asking for you to reciprocate. So after the break, we will delve into some things ongoing currently with the TPC and also what we've been working on. Replace your fears with actions of what we do, not what they are doing. Observe them, not absorb them, is the key. That song, Time for Love, was sung by one of our members, Jeannie Willits. Thank you for that song. Right, before I get into this about the TPC, and I arranged a Zoom call about 3 or 4 weeks ago of how to build the TPC and asked for everyone's input, and around 100 turned up, and the ones that did put some really good ideas forward, some of which we've taken forward. But since then, I've had around 8 to 10 requests for private one-on-one calls for ideas and help with the TPC, and yet none of those people turned up to the original call. You know, and I'm asking you to be a bit more considerate of my time. It's just not helpful to my time to do so many one-on-one calls, as time is not always my friend. And I ask people to pay more attention when we do the Zoom calls, which are for your benefit more than mine, and make sure you all attend and come with your ideas all in the one forum. Right, so what have we been up to in the background? Well, we have been revamping the website, thepeoplesclub.org, and also the thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org website as well. Now, we've added new sections to the People's Club, a section on who we are, testimonials of those who are helped, a new mission statement, and we are working on a subscriber to the People's Club also. Now, the object of that is to build the network, and we want millions of people to become part of a solution-based group. To subscribe, unlike others, we require no fees or security issue ridden apps either. We will just ask you for your name, email address, state, and then a selection called committees that detail your interest in topics you would like to be involved in. We're also pondering on adding a skill set section also. This is so we can keep things in-house should they be required. For example, common law. I've spoken of several groups all doing the same thing. That doesn't work. And I'm asking them all to combine into one unit, and when it gets big enough to then go into designated state groups, which we already have. Plus John at National Liberty Alliance has county groups, and Anna also has state assemblies. And the key is, let's get all those people together and combine ideas. Not sit around waiting for Kim or Tank or John or even Kevin Annett or Anna to tell them what to do. We want the people to work and action together. The only reason for autonomy is ego, people wanting their own names and groups, but it just doesn't work. It never has. And we can have tens or hundreds of groups with 10 to 50 people in it, or one group with hundreds or thousands in it. What carries more power? And we can then build up a network of common law groups and combine all of them on a Zoom call once a month or more, and formulate a proper plan to go forward en masse. So to be clear, I'm not asking you to leave your groups. I'm asking you to join with several other groups under one banner. And once it takes off, you will have more exposure, or hopefully you'll be proud of being part of the TPC network. Because if it goes viral, the TPC, what we would like to see is to become like the QAnon elements, with TPC stickers and badges and signs replacing the Q ones. Other committees would be involved in, say, farming or growing food, again, all combined under the TPC. Healthy food would be another committee. There are many who are separate who are involved in that. Let's all share our ideas and methods in one giant group. a charter school curriculum, a political action committee, a policy committee, a think tank committee, how to help the aged, the homeless or the poverty-stricken all under one roof. So we can then create our own search engine of what companies and groups are connected to the TPC, and then we would trade with each other and keep funds in-house, share ideas with each other and keep them in-house. The object is then to become the equivalent of the Google search engine. When it started, it was a novel idea, and now it's a global phenomenon. But we need to protect all this with some key components. Website security expert, a designated TPC tax accountant, a law team group to protect the TPC and the network. And as things develop, we would then need business experts, commercial experts, investment experts, all working for and by the people. Now, when it's set up, you can choose one or more selections in the drop-down boxes of what you wish to be involved in. And also, if not listed, a suggestion box as well for other categories you think should be added. Now, the email address will be, for example, all those interested in common law would be sent en masse an email and a Zoom link so we can all meet up at once and formulate a plan to go forward. Now, this plan is for America initially, and we can add Canada into it as well as a North American branch until we get sufficient Canadian people to then go on their own and form the TPC Canada. And with the name, email and state details in our database, we can then inform all Canadians of meetings and changes as well. Now, eventually this same model can be implemented in all other countries with the same standardized information. And what I envision is people going to the TPC for law help, accountancy and financial help, tax help, health help, better food choices help, new garden and grow your own food help, and shopping inside the TPC only, so that the money is all kept in-house, and the list is endless. And a group that we are asking all that join to consider to implement within themselves are few guidelines: need not greed, caring and sharing, cooperative, not comparative or competitive. And we must all teach and remind each other of those principles. If the many adopt those principles, it and we will change the world. Now, the Think Different site has been changed also. There was some confusion for donating to the TPC and myself, and they have been separated now for ease of choice. And unlike other shows, I never advertise our donation buttons, but a gentle reminder to members to please support the TPC and also my work when you can. And once again, thanks to all who have donated. It is much appreciated. THI has been removed from the front page of Think Different and is now in a separate page within that website. We are not here to promote THI, but the TPC, and some of our material in THI is too much for the average person, awake or not, although it's nice to see certain others copying much of it now. Yes, it has been noticed by our members, or well, not just our members actually, some of the members have been passing comment. But people The reason we're splitting THI from the TPC is people will always look for an excuse to not get involved. And the THI material is controversial to many, particularly my own stance on religion. So there is no advertisements or show links on the front page as before, and just a link at the bottom for archived shows and transcripts that are 3 months behind my Patreon. So the initial thing is to separate THI and the TPC, and an eventual phasing out of THI and a sole focus on the TPC. Now when it's ready, and it's not that far off, I'm asking each and every member and listener to go to thepeoplesclub.org and subscribe. And then let's build the network. Then you can go to the Think Different site, which has a link on the front page of the People's Club, and donate to support our own club. Encourage family members to do the same. Encourage friends to do the same. Whether you go to church, school or sporting events, and do the same. We're also setting up some flyers which will go on the People's Club website for download, and we're also looking into one group becoming a TPC printing station, so you can go and get cards and flyers and all kinds of other things. Now, members who subscribe will likely receive a monthly update email describing how things are unfolding, or whether we require actions, some promotional material, or for Zoom call announcements as well. And the object is to combine a database of people with ideas, skill sets, experience and knowledge, and to get people working together for a common goal, improving all lives, as all lives matter. The round robin of ideas being harvested to create multiple separate different groups is not beneficial to we the people, and more based on ego. If the separate groups idea worked, we would be in a better position than we are now. It hasn't, and so we must think different. This is thinking different. And it's not the time to sit around and wait for me to do it or anybody else. I'm asking you all to do it, all of us. Something else we're working on currently is building a TPC web shop for people to sell their wares, whether it's Cosmic Towers or the CBD Oil Group can display their wares on the website, and members can also sell their unwanted items like an eBay shop. Our t-shirt sales, all donated by Stephanie Arklick, can go on there as well. And what we're discussing at the moment is a small donation or commission of all sales go to the TPC. We will also be looking for a designated web shop administrator to run the whole site of inputting all the data, arranging sales on a commission basis only until we have larger funds to employ that person or persons permanently. Now, people selling their wares will have a drop-down box for commission on the sale of the items, and this is currently being discussed, and we are working on margins of commission. But whatever the board decides will be final. But we're also working on a plan for extra commission as well at the request of the seller. So, say we give the web host 2.5% and the TPC 5%. The seller will then have an option to increase the TPC only commission to their request. For example, a $100 item would have a $2.50 to the web host, $5 to the TPC, but a drop-down box to add to the TPC commission of your own choice. So as an example, the first option, the $100 item, would give the seller $92.50, with $7.50 going in commission. But you have the option to say the TPC commission on this item is, say, 20%, not 5%. So your sale would be $2.50 to the web host and $20 to the TPC, and you would get $77.50 for your sold item. We will put a disclaimer when the shop is open that the TPC is not endorsing or guaranteeing any item sold, and we will not be held responsible for any damaged, faulty or lost goods. That is between the seller and the buyer only. And other things to consider is if your sale is going through PayPal, which may take small fees, this is reflective in the end amount the seller gets. For example, many people bought t-shirts and sent $20 for the t-shirt. The TPC received about $18.90 out of that. People are welcome to come and sell their wares on our network, but must operate under the banner and guidelines of the TPC. And we would welcome ideas from all members on that aspect. Now, my wishes for all common law groups, which has been heavily prevalent recently, and assemblies to come together under one banner. And what I'm looking for is for them to iron out any differences in the narrative between the respective groups, agree on a common consensus, and plan forward as one. Now, 2 ideas the TPC common law group can do is add police departments who won't abide by their rules. There is 40 in California alone, out of 52, who have refused to accept their rules. You can also add in every militia group to the network also. They will provide safety for the common law groups and also security for the TPC. You could bring in veterans as well, again as safety and security, and eventually with enough funds we'll be able to pay them. Now, people will say this is similar to Life Force. Well, Life Force is similar to THI. In fact, it's a direct copy, sadly. But there is a difference between being a part of THI and part of the Life Force group outside from chasing the money. I get why people do it. Like I've said, it's part of the old programming issue. And we at THI are trying to create a new system of operating that doesn't include old programs or programming. Neither worked for the benefit of humanity. The TPC is a hand up. Life Force is a hand out. And I don't mean that in a negative slant in any way, shape or form. So what's the difference? Well, Life Force and Kim are only known to the upper echelon of the old control system, plus members of THI, Circle of White Light, Off Planet Radio, and Tank's RV followers. Outside of that, no one knows or is aware of Kim, the trust, or anything related to it. So given that fact, should the trust funds come out tomorrow, the majority of people suddenly became aware of these funds. On an energetic level, it will be seen as a hand out. Oh look, free money, and paying zero attention as to its purpose or the responsibility that comes with it. And this is no different to the state handing out stimulus checks, which in essence are a bribe on the people. The stimulus checks, not the trust, just to be clear. But stimulus checks are bribes to keep the public happy for a given length of time whilst they harvest and loot everything else, which is what's been going on. Now, one of the deals offered to Kim was a first $25,000 and then increased to $50,000 per person, not all of which was in terms of hard cash, but some was debt reduction, which ultimately goes to their banks, remember. Now, for the people to get given those funds, the Rothschilds would then have taken over the trust. And they worked out that all of the $25,000 per person, or $50,000 per person, would be back in their control within 6 months. And then they had control of the trust for the next 490 plus years. You all know full well the people through THI is building the TPC. Something that requires many people to participate in, and it's all about the many building their own structure of support. It's all about the people being sovereign, making their own choices, supporting each other, caring for each other, and looking after each other. So, should you receive financial support from the TPC or funding for a project, that is then a hand up, not a handout. And it's the difference between the old world and us creating a new world. And even Kim herself agreed the $1 or more idea would have a more beneficial aspect to it. And what we're trying to achieve here is to teach the people to be personally responsible again with their lives, actions and thoughts. And should the trust funds ever come out, and we at the TPC are funded, those funds then supplement the foundations we have already built, largely with no money. In the 100 series, which this won't be the only reference tonight, there is a mention of where are the good guys? And the answer in the show was, there are none. Where are all the good guys? And the reply was, there are none. And sadly that is more true in the highest levels than the people think, all bought and paid for to play their game. There is a few that got wrapped into the system, but for the majority it is in them all along. The cabal go on profiling from a young age and categorise if people fit into certain moulds or roles. So it's in their DNA, so to speak, to begin with. Just like the core pirate structure, it's all about how far you can trample all over your work colleagues to get to the so-called top. Reality is you were nowhere near the top as you thought. And the clowns all bought into the illusion of being important. Even some of the 301 bloodline families have found that out to their cost recently. But then we come to our level of where are all the good guys. Well, there are many good people, but there's 7 issues. 1, will they wake up? 2, if they do wake up, how far will they go to be the change? 3, are they prepared in some cases to sacrifice their lifestyle to get involved? 4, will they accept heightened levels of abuse and ridicule, certainly early on? 5, will they put their life on hold whilst doing so? 6, will they be bought off to shut up or stand down? And 7, will they literally put their life on the line for the cause? 7 big questions that all can ask it themselves. And the reality is very few will do all 7. And perhaps therein lies the issue, does it not? Just how far are you prepared to go to change not only your life, but also everybody else's? And it's a big sacrifice that sadly only the few are prepared to make, fighting for a cause that is greater than you. Those people sadly are few and far between. We know, we have observed it. But the key is like the 100 series. You have to create the good guys by joining them up and joining up together. Overlapping circles of people that eventually form the pattern of the flower of life. That is our task ahead, and if you really want change, more people have to have the fortitude to do all of the 7 just mentioned. A new beginning has just begun. Well, that's what we're attempting to do with the TPC, a whole new beginning, a whole new way. Nothing worked before. Let's try something different. Right, some news items. Corruption. Check. Vote rigging. Check. Dodgy ballots. Check. Fake voters. Check. Dead voters. Check. Overvoting. Subscription. Check. All that happened in 2016 and every other election. What difference does it make in 2020, except your pre-selected candidate is losing or has lost? Trump was advised to cancel the election months ago on the grounds of national safety, and should he have done that, the lockdown and masks charade would have ended overnight. But he thought he would sail it. He thought wrong to date. So, Mr. Biden has won, so we're told. So what happens next? More chaos? More globalism? More clownery? Less truth? Less reality? And less common sense? So it's not exactly any different to the last 4 years, is it? And Biden said this week, the key is tackling the coronavirus pandemic is his top priority, and he says he will also focus on the economy, which was caused by globalists. So what will you do about that, Biden? He said he would tackle racism, which was also caused by globalists, think tanks and the media. So what will you do about that, Biden? And climate change, which was also caused by the globalists, think tank and the media. So what will you do about that, Mr. Biden? The solution is declare it as fake, as that is the truth. And that will fix all those problems in one swoop. But here is what he also stated this week, announcing the first steps in his transition plan. His team said there would be more testing and Americans would be asked to wear masks. Really? Fascism, Zionism, communism and globalism all rules then, eh, Mr. Biden? All in one package. Watch out for early on in his fake presidency. There will be a plethora of trade deals, agreements and negotiations and possibly aid delivered to the Ukraine. Wonder why. Mr. Biden made his first pick this week, Ronald Klain, and it was announced he would serve as the White House Chief of Staff for the President-elect Mr. Biden. Mr. Klain is born too. Former top Trump aide Stephen Bannon did a podcast, or his podcast was permanently suspended by Twitter and had an episode yanked from his YouTube. And he implied that the FBI Director Christopher Wray and the government infectious disease expert, there are none, Dr. Anthony I don't give a Fauci, should be beheaded and have their heads put on pikes outside the White House. It's going a bit far. But those comments came while Bannon is free on bond in a federal criminal case in which he is accused of defrauding donors to a non-profit group purportedly dedicated to building the wall on the southern border of the United States. As the alt media complaints over 5G rises, China launched 12 satellites this week carrying payloads for 6G. And it involves the use of high-frequency terahertz waves to achieve data transmission speeds many times faster than 5G is likely to be capable of. The technology revolution and curtailing humanity increases by the day, it seems, and goes unhindered because humanity is incapable of building an alternative currently. We're too divided. South Korea next. Their health agency, which didn't make the mainstream media, from what I gather, said on Tuesday that a total of 101 people, most of whom were elderly, remember Expose 1, died after receiving seasonal flu vaccines, according to reports. And the deaths had stoked public anxiety over the safety of such vaccines, but the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, Langley, said 97 of those deaths have very limited relation with the flu shots. Yeah, right. Bit like COVID then, isn't it? Another 4 cases are under investigation. Of the total, 84 people were aged over 70, just like COVID, followed by 8 under 60 and 9 in the 60s. The health authorities have repeatedly said they found no direct links between the flu shots and deaths. Yeah, right. And urging people to get flu vaccinations before the onset of winter amid the coronavirus pandemic. Does anyone not put 2 and 2 together and make 4 with that? Elderly people dying. One's a common cold, a bit more severe. One's a fake virus. One disappears off the face of the map, or them altogether, flu, as are reported in recent shows, because COVID is responsible for everything. A dark winter ahead for the elderly, it seems. Operation Dark Winter was the code name for a senior-level bioterrorist attack simulation conducted in June of 2001 and ran out of Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. Operation Dark Winter, which was the precursor to Event 201, which we covered in Expose 2. Current President Donald Trump dropped 3 agency heads in the days after the election, and the ousted agency leaders include Neil Chatterjee, Chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, Lisa Gordon Haggerty, Administrator of the National Nuclear Security Administration, and Bonnie Glick, Deputy Administrator of the U.S. Agency for International Development. And the departures came amid speculation that other agency heads and government officials may be fired or resign from the Trump administration, including FBI Director Chris Wray and Defense Secretary Mark Esper. Now, rumour has it that Trump appointee, an all-round war criminal and torturer, Gina Haspel, who's the head of the CIA, is also on the chopping block prior to January, I hear. On Monday, Ashley Parker reported that Fox News, I believe Trump's been tweeting away about them all day, cut off the White House press secretary Kayleigh McEnany, saying the network could not in good conscience continue to air her false claims for which she has provided no supporting evidence, presumably it'd be about fake ballots and fake votes. So why is this happening now? Because Fox News has a new vice president since the election result, and it's Danny O'Brien, who just happens to be a former Biden chief of staff. Oops. But the folly of Trump not dealing with the media is all there and in your face. And out go all the minimal support given to the people by the mainstream media, of which Tucker Carlson was the most prominent supporter of Trump, and also out many of the things that were covered in our show. I suspect he's the next casualty. The US State Department gave Congress notification it plans to sell 18 sophisticated armed MQ-9B aerial drones to the United Arab Emirates in a deal worth as much as $2.9 billion. And people who were briefed on the notification said that they would like this to go ahead. But given what happened recently with the United Arab Emirates and Israel, I wonder how much of the kickback the Israelis got out of that deal. Now, the move comes on the heel of last week's notification of a potential sale of F-35 jets to the Middle Eastern country, and this would mark the first armed drone export since the Trump administration reinterpreted a Cold War era arms agreement between 34 nations to allow US defense contractors to sell more drones to alleged allies. And it's been reported that the United Arab Emirates has shown interest in purchasing drones from the US for a long period of time, and would be among the first customers in line after US export policies changed this summer. A $600 million deal to sell 4 unarmed but weapons-ready MQ-9B Guardian drones to Taiwan was the first to be formally notified to Congress on Tuesday. So, we are back to the only thing that sells from or for or by America these days: weapons of people destruction. And that is only because it's being run by clowns in the military and the agencies and not the government. But we have to ask, is that the image America and Americans want to portray to the world? Are we only interested in wars and selling weapons? New Zealand next. They swore in its new cabinet on Friday, including 5 Maori and its first openly gay deputy prime minister, as the Crime Minister Jacinda Ardern's government increased its majority with the release of the full results of its October 17th general election. Now, the Maori Party, representing the indigenous community, makes up about 15% of the population, picked up an additional seat to secure 2 representatives in the new parliament. New Zealanders voted in the referendums on marijuana and also on euthanasia, oh my, while casting ballots in the general election. A thin 50.7 majority voted against the legalisation of recreational cannabis use, while nearly 2/3 of voters supported a bill to allow people who meet certain requirements to ask for a medical assistance to end their lives. That woman, Ardern, has some serious Zionist fascism tendencies that the people of New Zealand need to act upon, and remind Ardern who has the real power and call her out at every opportunity. She is a New World Order puppet. Off to Ireland next. The foreign minister there has slammed Israel for destroying 70 buildings, including family homes in the West Bank, and the reprehensible acts have left 73 Palestinian people homeless, including 41 children. Simon Coveney said he is deeply dismayed that Israeli authorities demolished buildings belonging to the 11 Palestinian Bedouin families in Humsa al-Bakaya in the northern Jordan Valley. Jordan being the operative word, not Israel. And Israeli bulldozers destroyed the village, including houses, businesses and sanitation facilities, all courtesy of Mr. Trump, who did the deal for Jordan, remember, and close to the Syria border. Now, the United Nations labelled the demolition the largest displacement incident in over 4 years. And the Minister Coveney said the acts are clearly prohibited under international law, and Israel had failed to meet its obligations as the occupying power. And the eviction of families and demolition of their homes is a brutal and violent act, he said. These most vulnerable of people should be protected by the occupation authorities, not subject to further injustice. And he said it's deeply disappointing that Israel continues to carry out these reprehensible acts, which are a grave breach of international humanitarian law. Now, Israel has occupied the West Bank since 1967, and the Jordan Valley falls into the territory's Area C, which is fully controlled by Israel's army. Now, the branch of the army that oversees civilian affairs in the West Bank, COGAT, C-O-G-A-T, said it had destroyed the structures because they were built illegally in a firing zone. Illegally in a firing zone. And under rules imposed by Israel, Palestinians cannot build structures in the area without permits, which are typically refused, and demolitions are a common occurrence. Now, according to the UN, Israel has carried out widespread demolitions in the West Bank and East Jerusalem this year, leaving 869 Palestinians homeless, and this is the largest number of demolitions since 2016. And the Intergovernmental Organization branded Israel's actions unlawful and issued a statement calling for demolitions to be immediately halted. And those comments were also echoed by the European Union. The EU said it reiterated its call on Israel to halt all such demolitions, including of EU-funded structures, in particular in light of the humanitarian impact of the current coronavirus fake pandemic. There's a simple solution to all this. Very simple. It is to label Israel as a pariah state, impose heavy sanctions upon them, and boycott all of their goods and services until they learn to live in peace with all other peoples in the region allocated to them in 1947. They are lucky to have that region alone, because there is zero evidence the country of Israel ever existed to begin with. And this constant fighting due to some books thousands of years old, who nobody really knows who wrote them, and it certainly wasn't God or Jesus, of whether they're valid or not, has to stop. And it's child level thinking and madness. If they're not going to abide by international law, it's simple. Declare them a pariah state, impose heavy global sanctions upon them, and boycott all of their goods and services. And Trump, Biden, or whichever other clown is in the White House needs to stop giving aid to this country who are committing international crimes on a regular basis. Conservative activist Candace Owens has announced plans to sue Facebook's third-party fact-checkers, accusing them of censorship and vowing to expose the relationship between the social media giant and the fact-checker activists. And she said it's time to fact-check the fact-checkers, absolutely. And the defendants in the lawsuit also include USA Today, as well as Lead Stories fact-checker, who are both third-party fact-checking partners for Facebook. Owens said she was also planning to bring independent fact-checking non-profit PolitiFact to court as well. And she accused the fact-checkers on Facebook of being part of the allegedly ongoing attempt to turn the US into a communist country where wrong opinion is suppressed. And she said the fact-checkers are activists for the left that shut down your speech if they don't like it, she argued. And she said, quite literally, a doctor gave his opinion about COVID-19, which I shared, and Facebook issued a strike on my account because they said only information that they agree with about COVID-19 was acceptable. Zeke Hall. And she also added that her Facebook account was subsequently demonetized. Now, the Facebook's fact-checking program was rolled out back in 2016 in the aftermath of the US presidential election, with the social media giant insisting it was needed to promote, quote, an authentic environment. They wouldn't know if they fell over it. While still enabling people to have a voice. Well, clearly that's not happened. They've cut off everyone's voice. That's why you're wearing masks. Everyone's hit at the throat chakra. Well, instead of bluntly removing the content disapproved by the fact-checkers, the network reduces its visibility in the feed, as well as issues various warning labels ranging from altered and missing contact to outright false. And this process has repeatedly faced criticism from various primarily conservatively minded users who accuse the fact-checkers of having a strong left-wing bias and exercising political censorship. Similar and even harsher measures have been introduced by other social media networks, including Twitter. So instead of employing third-party fact-checkers to stay neutral like Facebook, it rolled out its own algorithms. Labelling misleading content and providing links to information it deems credible. The Zionist-led fascist creep hovers over us all, it seems, and I want to thank Candace Owens for this stance, and if memory serves me well, this is not the first time she has stood up and shouted out for the people either. Perhaps one to keep an eye on for the future. Back to the White House and Zionist Mossad snake Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and allegedly one of his most trusted advisors. Not much more he ain't. He reportedly approached Mr. Trump this week to discuss with him about conceding to President-elect Joe Biden. Now the question is not whether he asked him or not, but when did he ask him to do that? Think about that. You know, I have it on official record from at least 2 sources outside of the trustee mentioning it this week that Trump officially sold out. The question is, to whom? And the answer is, I told you all, and the trustee, ad nauseum for the past 5 years, even when we were back on Cosmic Voice. Watch out for the point 12+1 I read out well over a month ago now, which was Pelosi. But the next stage is a Kushner and or Ivanka Trump for 2024. I can see it coming a mile off. And if that takes effect, Israel Cohen's speech in 1912 and its goals will be rubber stamped. We have to stop it. The next portion of tonight's show is called The Fight Back. And this is going on currently in the UK. There was protests all around the country over the new lockdowns that were imposed this week. And at Manchester University, students woke up on the first day of lockdowns to find fences had been erected around their dormitories and penning them in like a prison. And apparently they'd had enough. And by that evening, the fences were torn down and the university backed down. That's what happens when you come together. Now, students at the University of Manchester ripped down the lockdown fences that was installed without warning at their Fallowfield campus, and hundreds of students staged a protest on Thursday night after the university erected metal fencing at the halls of residents, including Owens Park and also Unsworth Park. And earlier in the day, the university had issued a statement saying the fencing was put in place as a security measure as England enters another 4-week lockdown. Since when has a virus been a security measure that required fencing? I'm pleased these people stood up. Everywhere they put fences, pull them down. Just don't smash anything. Now, the university has been heavily criticised by some students and parents for penning them in, with students only learning what was happening when they woke up to find the fencing being erected. Now, the country is on lockdown, and they're penning in your children. But why are they in school anyway, with a lockdown in place? Do people not ask that question? But I'm pleased to see people fighting back, and we need much more of it. Here's another one that fought back in Cornwall in the UK. An NHS nurse turned whistleblower resigned in public, and it was recorded but quickly removed from YouTube and Twitter. The video out of Cornwall shows a nurse in uniform giving a speech explaining why she decided to resign from her job. And she said, "I don't need the uniform to prove that I work for them, but today I'm publicly resigning," she stated. The nurse then revealed how she received an email from her bosses demanding an explanation as to why she was being critical of the official COVID policy and that people were reporting her. And this is the problem, the snitch culture and the Milgram program people of believing authority on everything, when they've provided zero proof on anything they claim, COVID or otherwise. Any culture that accepts official narrative without question is guilty of crimes against humanity. What happens when you question it? They ban you from the internet platforms, and that in and of itself tells you they're covering up the truth. Because all truth never fears investigation. And she said, "Unfortunately, I can't lie anymore," explaining how she took a screenshot of an internal hospital data showing there were just 3 people across 3 hospitals in the region infected with COVID. Oops. And the authority want to demand an explanation as to why. That we the people demand an explanation why you're talking shit. There you go. The total deaths from these 3 hospitals across the last 7 months is just 76 people. Roughly 10 deaths a month, according to the nurse, who questioned why it was necessary for her region to go into lockdown given such sparse figures. And she said, "I've decided there's no point. I've gone against the rules within the NHS. I have shared confidential information that people need to see," the nurse said, adding that others, doctors and nurses, were also trying to speak out. The people need to support them, not snitch on them. You people who do that are quislings of the worst kind. All service to self and don't give a shit about anybody else. And you are the reason this world is in a mess. Period. Kudos to the nurse and many others in the medical profession who are speaking out. Also fighting back, we're going to Paris next. Teenagers and police clashed during coronavirus protests in Paris, where unfortunately violence erupted and fires burned in the street and a police car was vandalised. Probably because they were driving it at the protesters. Serves them right, if that was the case. Students had gathered outside of a high school in Compiègne in the north of Paris to protest over new restrictions that had been imposed to allegedly tackle the country's coronavirus outbreak. But the situation turned violent as police attempted to break up the crowd. And this is the second escalation in recent days as teachers and students have been opposing the government's decision to keep schools open during the nationwide lockdown, arguing that they're being forced into a crowded environment and that puts their health at risk. Methinks they talk a bit too much common sense. It's a problem in this planet about talking with common sense, which is why they've been rejected. And footage on social media showed young people setting fire to the barricades that had been set up outside of the school, more penning in the kids. And the mayor, Philip Marini, told France's BFM TV that calm had returned to the area following the disturbance, and the local police department confirmed on Twitter that 4 arrests had been made. Unfortunately, a fireman was injured during the unrest, and the police official or the mayor said it was unacceptable the amount of criminal damage as a result of the incident. A similar protest on Tuesday, riot police pepper-sprayed students who blockaded a high school to protest over packed classes and poor sanitary measures that had been put in place. So people complain about and are concerned about their health, and cops pepper spray them. And the government's telling you, you must be concerned about your health and you must be locked down. Does that make any sort of sense? And I'm asking people across the world to keep up the protests, but please do not use violence or damaging property. This does not serve as well as a protesting group. Yes, I'm aware there is agitators. Single them out and throw them out. A Liverpool-based Broad Green International School is in the privileged position of running a pilot scheme with Public Health England that will bring in the military in the UK to run COVID-19 tests. Now, the idea is to test children without getting parental consent first. Identify each individual with a unique barcode. Isolate and secure anyone who tests positive. That's the scheme. Test children without getting parental consent first. Identify each with a unique barcode. Isolate and secure anyone who tests positive. But apparently, after much negative feedback from parents and the public, the school has backed down and now stated they will only test students who have parental consent. And a new letter was published on Sunday, November the 8th, to replace the letter published on Friday, November the 6th. Non-parent consent, using the military, which creates fear for the children, but also applies the Milgram experiment of consent due to authority or fear-based figures. Barcodes. Identify each individual with a unique barcode. Oh my. The mark of the beast. It's all very Hunger Games districts, that to me. Unbelievable. There's been a very high-profile lawsuit at issues in Kenya, but it was largely related to Nigeria that the company Pfizer turned to. Now, in 1996, the company needed a human trial for what it hoped would be a pharmaceutical blockbuster, which was a broad-spectrum antibiotic that could be taken in tablet form. And the US-based company, Pfizer, sent in a team of its doctors into the Nigerian slum city of Kano in the midst of a very bad meningitis epidemic to perform what it calls a humanitarian mission. That's a bit like the UN now, and that's a lie. However, the accusers claim it was an unlicensed medical trial on critically ill children, and a team of Pfizer doctors reached the Nigerian camp just as the outbreak, which killed at least 11,000 people, was peaking. That was the meningitis. Trouble is, who caused it? They set themselves up within meters of a medical station run by the aid group Médecins Sans Frontières, which was dispensing proven treatments to ease the epidemic. And from the crowd that gathered at the Kano Infectious Disease Hospital, 200 sick children were picked. Half were given doses of the experimental Pfizer drug called Trovan, and the others were treated with a proven antibiotic from a rival company. 11 of the children died, and many more, it is alleged, later suffered serious side effects ranging from organ failure to brain damage. But with meningitis, cholera and measles still raging and crowds still queuing at the fence of the camp, the Pfizer team then packed up after 2 weeks and left. And that would have probably been the end of the story, as it happens so often in these very poor regions, if it weren't for a Pfizer employee, one Walter Spiel. About 18 months after the medical trial, he wrote a letter to the then chief executive of the company, William Steer, saying that the trial had violated ethical rules. Now, Mr. Walter Spiel was fired a day later for reasons unrelated to the letter, insists Pfizer. They lie. The company claims it was only 5 children that died after taking Trovan. Only. One's too many. And 6 others died after receiving injections of the certified drug Rocephin. Now, the pharmaceutical giant said it was the meningitis that harmed the children and not their drug trial. But did the parents know that they were offering their children up for an experimental medical trial? No, says the Nigerian parent Malam Musa Zango. And he claims his son Sumalia, who was then 12 years old, was left deaf and mute after taking part in that trial. But Pfizer, predictably, has denied this and says consent had been given by the Nigerian state and the families of those treated. Yet again, they lie. And it produced a letter of permission from a Kano ethics committee. But that letter then turned out to have been backdated, and the committee set up a year after the original medical trial. Oops. At stake in this lawsuit at one point last year was that more than $8 billion in punitive damages was being sought in a string of cases, as well as potential jail terms in Nigeria for several Pfizer staff. And said there has been a complex web of cases with proceedings in Connecticut, New York, Lagos, Abuja and Kano, according to Mr. Etigui. And he said the strategy of big companies when they're dealing with smaller opponents is to stretch the process to overwhelm us until we are ready to accept whatever they want to offer. Now, Trovan never became the blockbuster that Pfizer had hoped for and is currently no longer in production. Oops. The EU has banned the drug and it's also been withdrawn from sales in the US. No doubt to be repackaged as something else and sold to another poor country, which is what happens very regularly in the US with pharmaceutical companies. All the old stock get repackaged and sold again, even though they're out of date. So it appears that Pfizer has finally ended the public relations nightmare with Friday's settlement but the Trovan battle may not be over yet. At the end of January 2009, a New York appeal court ruled Mr. Etegui and Mr. Altschula's case could be heard in the US, and the Connecticut attorney says it could still go ahead. He said, "Our case is firmly embedded in the US, so a Nigerian settlement does not foreclose our case." And he said, "This is very good news, and I'm glad we remained the constant gardener and could see this come to fruition." Pfizer is the company now stating that they have a COVID-19 vaccine and is being promoted by the portal people. Should we trust this group with anything? Not for me. But as Pfizer states they have a vaccine for COVID which earns an awful lot of money, their lead CEO has just dumped all of his stocks at the same time. Why would he do that? It makes no sense. Unless there's a hidden program running. Right, we've got a number of pieces to cover now. And, well, first, this was written by one of the members, and I agree. These clowns and baboons. Now, a baboon is a Congress, and so Congress is a gaggle of baboons. They care not who you vote for, just as long as you vote. Two cheeks of the same ass, two wings of the same bird, one big team of spoiled special boy, girl reprobates. They just want our consent, giving away our power to be ruled, judged or controlled. Consent, control and total domination is their game, which I've stopped playing many moons ago. When we walk away, don't comply, consent, feed it our energy, it eventually goes bye-bye, as the new route is taken and being built. It's just enough people haven't realised this concept yet, but they are catching on now. Yes, and I agree. And yet people still voted, fraudulently or otherwise, for a 77-year-old with signs of senility, as well as masks, as their president and tasked to fix a whole country. Does anyone else not think that is only not plainly wrong, but bizarre in the extreme? Most have parents or grandparents at that age. Would you expect your parents or grandparents to run a country at age 77? And yet 70 to 80 million people voted for that. Now, with the election finally declared all over, bar some shouting and lots of distraction and maybe courts and all the other malarkey that will go on between now and probably January the 20th, distraction phases. The key now is what happens next. I was kind of reminded in the past week of my hypothetical piece from September of 2018, and it came to pass. As in that piece, I warned of Trump's lack of grey area support, which is essential in politics. The swing voter, those who are unable to decide for themselves and ultimately run with a majority vote or a protest vote. Trump divided people, there's no question of that, regardless of political party affiliation. He's just one of those characters that people either love or hate. There's no in between. And in political circles, that can be damaging. Last week's election was a protest vote against Trump, the person. Even by Republicans. Because surely nobody in the country actually believes Biden will be of any use for we the people. He's no use to himself, never mind anybody else. Will Biden stay there for the 4 years? Or does my 12+1 or 13-point plan done a month or two back also come to fruition? And the frightening prospect of the she-devil Pelosi being president. A Speaker of the House who cannot speak is another stick for the rest of the world to beat Americans with. But we at THI have a plan for ourselves of which then we can decide what happens next on a big scale with the right support. With all the disillusioned Trump supporters, what happens next for them? What happens to Q? What happens to the QAnons? What happens to the trustee who threw her hat into one ring only? These are the biggest what happens next questions for us all. Now, Trump had generated a big following and amassed a Q-based army of followers. How will they all feel now? With what they believed was a guaranteed win. And no doubt they're all now getting quite a ribbon, but not as much as the Q followers. For the best part of 4 years, Q led people down a rosy garden path of mass arrests, booms, panic in DC, and the now classic line of nothing can stop what is coming. Except what came was no mass arrests, no JFK alive, a whimper instead of a boom, and a panic arrived in the White House, and what was coming for a man in his middle 70s who stutters and stammers and couldn't even remember whether he was running for Senate or President. So no Q, you didn't stop what was coming. You led people down the garden path of promises and a wake club. Now, I would be delighted to be proven wrong, but how long can we carry on with the secret plan no one knows of and a secret chess game that delivers no gains in 4 years? None. But at least you did get people to research for themselves, and for that we thank you. But with no Trump now, presumably there'll be no Q either. Or will they roll on as some Biden agitator? QAnons now with no Q, no Trump and no Twitter accounts. What happens to them? And then we have the trustee, who also relied on Trump and to a lesser degree Q, with her reputation with the Democrats at a very, very poor level. How will she continue now? Now, it could be said that the trustee should be impartial, and that is not a critique, but it is an observation. But if you're going to represent the all as the Eve, then surely that must include Democrats as well. Although I don't envy her having to talk to Pelosi. One of the problems Kim may have is her White House insider Tom may now lose his job as well, as the DNC-led Citadel Group threw him out of the Treasury building 2 years ago. They know who he works with and for. And I hope he doesn't, as I quite like that guy. And like me, he has worked for Kim for the past 4 years for free as well. But if Trump goes away and builds a media empire, as hypothecated, then perhaps Lifeforce can take advantage of that platform. So what happens next? Well, I hope THI and more so the TPC gains a lot of subscribers from the now dormant Q and Trump followers. And we can build a country in our image, not theirs. But that image has to be better than what has gone on previously. And essentially now we have 4 years to build our own community. And I'm asking all the alt media to get behind it. Because this division of groups has ran its course. It has not worked for us, and separation only helps the system. We have built the TPC for us all to participate in, regardless of what group you follow. Because this is not a subject-based group. This is for the all, and all people to build a plan and a group for and by the people for the first time in history. Another comment that came from one of the members who said, in my opinion, people have not suffered enough to take action. He said, I'm not saying that suffering is needed, but many do not use their brain enough to see where the current world is going. As a saying goes, smart learn from mistakes of others, and the dumb from their own. And sadly, many are just too dumb or too dumbed down by the current society to see and act on what is happening. Absolutely, that was spot on. And we can deny the fact or do something about it. You know, crying over fake ballots and election results, over 2 candidates that was chosen for you to be selected to be a president of a corporation known as USA Inc. that operates like a government but is most definitely not, is pure folly. To become a full-blown adult, you have to stop relying on government to fix your problems. It's no different to being a child asking for parents to fix their problems. And at which point in life do we fix our own problems? Governments have never fixed our problems. They have just pacified us enough to not complain. Nothing more and nothing less. But those pacifying levels have reduced drastically over the past 40 years, and we are now far too readily accept the pittance we receive. How much do you wish to suffer before you do something valid to stop your suffering and the suffering of many others? That is the great question. As Cassandra said, there has always been people who will try on behalf of a select few, but they are rejected by your own people. And evidence of that has been all too clear for THI this year, with Shane, Randy, Jimmy, Alan, Ava and Kim doing varying degrees of stupidity and divide and conquer tactics. 2 people this week I spoke to said, I love your idea of the TPC, but it will take too much time and we need it now. But I started the TPC 4 years ago. And in part, and I have to take some responsibility for that as well, we waited in some part for the trust funds. But people waited 4 years for Trump to deliver. People waited 8 years for Obama to bring change. People are waiting 13 years for an RV, currency revaluation. People waited 15 to 20 years for birth certificate and strawman accounts. People waited for the same duration for Saint Germain accounts. People have waited 15 years for Nasara funds. People have waited 6 years for Jessara funds. People have waited 8 years for Neil Keenan to deliver the collateral accounts. People have waited 18 years for mass arrests. People have waited 3.5 years for Q to fix things. And people have waited 21 years for Gould and Win Miller to fix the world. People have waited 10 years plus for common law to save them. People have waited 8 years for BRICS to save the world. People have waited for 9 years of 2 weeks promises. People have waited 25 years for ETs to save them. People have waited 3,000 years for Muhammad to save them. People have waited 2,000 years for Jesus to save them, and people wait and pray every day for God to save them. What is the common denominator in that? We waited for others to fix or save us. How has that worked out for us? The same effect that praying each day does. 0. God is a convenient cop-out for laziness and a lesson in service to self only. Why? Because you pray to God to save you. You pray to God to help you. You pray to God to keep your well-beings, jobs, family, possessions and life. All about you. And that is service to self. And I know that statement will be a trigger for some, and some will be calling me out right now. But the trigger is, I've just told you the truth. Whether you like it or you don't, it is the truth at the core of what was said. Look at it again for yourself and you'll realise I've just told you where you are and what you are currently. But you're not in the minority, far from it. Most other people do exactly the same thing. Even atheists, when in trouble, call for God to save them. So it makes no difference whether you are religious or not. Has that worked out for you? If your answer is yes, I can't help you. But if your answer is no, then the question remains is, what happens next? Do we wait for the next lazy-based narrative to come along and fund or save us? Or do we build for the first time in history a group for and by the people? And waiting another 4 years to then say, I wish we had built the People's Club because I don't like these two candidates and I don't like having no job, savings, businesses or homes, because by then it'll be too late. All these protests and petitions signed by the few matters not one jot to the old system, but tens of millions of TPC generating intelligent and solution-based petitions with tens of millions supporting it, lets them know we not only mean business, but we are their business and we will be in their face daily. That, should it unfold, terrifies the globalists. We have to end the American trait of things must happen today or tomorrow. Life is not a takeaway drive-in booth. It requires patience. The patience word. Patience. It requires thinking, experiencing, learning and no little effort on all of our parts to make it better. We have spent 40 years letting everything go. Freedoms, lifestyles, manners, thinking, human rights. And now you have to stay in your homes and wear masks like the naughty children. Are you a child or are you an adult? Is your behaviour childlike of asking others to save or fix you, or will you be an adult and save and fix yourself and then help others to do the same? The choice is simple. You are asking the one to save billions. I am asking the billions to save the one, and the one is the all. One of the few potential positives of this global lockdown and also global financial squeeze will not be felt or seen currently, but in the future, unless you view the now in overview and future thinking. So what is the potential positives? Well, for the vast majority outside of the billionaire level, will all be reduced to lower incomes and jobs. Too many still immersed in the old world of greed. That appears like a disaster, but in overview it's not. Why? Because this world and its people have created a system of the haves and have-nots, and there is far more have-nots in this world suffering from dire poverty, malnourishment, poor health, living conditions and lifestyles. I've said this before, but we in the Western world, by and large, with a home, food on the table, clean water, a sewage system and clothing, are all actually in the top 15% of the real wealth on this planet. And some are in the top 10%. And to the so-called second and third world countries with just the 5 basics, to them we live like kings, and yet we all take it for granted and still complain. Mainly about minimum wage, which is correct in real terms. But minimum wage, say at $10 per hour, is 5 times the rate of per day, not hour, for millions of people around the world. In the USA alone, there are 18,314,698 millionaires. Yes, you heard that right. 18 million millionaires, and yet there is 35 million living in poverty. Those 18 million millionaires are why 35 million people live in poverty. Through a basic lack of sharing. And they are also responsible for the 45 million on food stamps in this country also. That is a greed-based system that ultimately now will fail us all, as those millionaires are now starting to be harvested by the ultimate in pure greed, the billionaires. There is zero need to have $1 million or more sitting in a bank account, as that creates shortage further down the line. And what it also does is it creates, in many cases, a dance onto the dark paths. It is no coincidence that those with the most money are by and large psychopaths. Period. And we in the Western world need to get more perspective. We have become obsessed with keeping up with the Joneses program, a comparative-based earning scheme that is largely achieved based in debt. That's what it is at the core. A comparative-based earning scheme that is largely achieved based in debt. The American middle class is and was an illusion. It's not based on wages earned, but based on how much debt you could put yourself into. Be honest, we've all done it, yourself included. The credit rating system tells you that the more debt you have, the higher your credit rating, as long as you make a payment. But if you don't have any loans or use credit cards, you don't have a credit rating. But credit in their world is classed to us as a debt, as debts are then leveraged to create more debts and then passed on to the consumer in terms of interest rates. But those interest rates are not to pay our debts, but theirs. And it's the same with the trust. Assets of countries contained within it were accumulating interest, when the old system stated it was creating interest payments and so debt. No, those assets are interest bearing. And with jobs, incomes and businesses vanishing and shopping items becoming unessential purchases, what we are actually witnessing now is the vanishing of the materialistic world in front of our eyes. It's unfolding. And to many, this will initially bring great hardship of their fallen lifestyles. But in overview, it can also bring some much needed perspectives as well, and a desire to share the wealth more fairly and ultimately looking after each other more, rather than harvesting each other. Some people have sent me certain things I should look at, or I should change my opinion on technology. But I'm not interested in being convinced that technology can work for us at this point. So I'm not interested in blockchain, Bitcoin, or any other fresh air tokens, digital wallets, or app banking. Why? Because nobody really understands blockchain, period. It's a bit like law. You think you know it, you don't. And blockchain is an agency-based system, and you don't think they created it for our purpose, did you? Bitcoin is also an agency-created entity, just like encryption. And again, you don't think they created it for our purpose, did you? Fresh air tokens are not for we the people. It is a seducement program designed to pull people in who chase the money. Digital wallets or app banking is the exact same program that Bitcoin and the Facebook coin Libra are running. No banks, central or otherwise, is what they're planning. Decentralization, it is called. They told you that in the manifesto. Again, the people who follow that rhetoric are people who chase the money. And the few of THI who went to Lifeforce are doing just that, chasing the money. There's no ifs or buts. You chased the money. And I'm okay with your choice, as it's where you are at on a personal level. You still have the old system programming like many other people do. But don't rail at me for pointing out that fact. The Kim has the promise of trust funds, and that is your lure. But whilst it is valid, there are no guarantees of it being released to we the people anytime soon, unless clowns put in place a backup program to harvest it another way. This is what the distraction is now. They are planning for their electronic world, but also a backup if they don't. And the backup is to release the funds to the people, but only when they have control of all the businesses. They will then collect the money we spend and start it all again. And this is something Kim should be pondering long and hard on, and not as reported to me by several people this week, and a quote of giggling like a little schoolgirl and gloating with Tank because one of THI members helped them out. That's embarrassing behaviour, and more people are noticing it. And it makes no difference to me, but it's not my validity and reputation that's being shredded. It was not a good look, I'm told, but they are the gift that keep giving currently, and the behaviour patterns become indicative. But it's the oldest trick in the book, all designed to hook you into a money program, just like the dinar, dongs and zims of the RV program. And people wasted thousands of real money on it due to people like Tank promoting it. Tank cost many of his friends and associates thousands of dollars and put many of them out of their homes and businesses due to his promotion of a fake program. Something he's not really addressed. But the Clowns in Panic show revealed it all. And it's disappointing to me that people who've been made aware of what they're up to are sleepwalking into their path and trap with fresh air tokens, digital wallets and banking apps. With no banks planned for the future, what are the banking apps for? Think about that. There's a lot of talk surrounding make yourself a sovereign citizen recently. And someone posted someone who'd done it in the UK. And it's particularly common amongst the common law people. But personally, whilst it's a good idea to reclaim your status, as it stands, it can become an issue later in life. because currently under the citizen status you are supported in part by the state should you get unemployed or have or obtain a disability, and also have a pension whether you work or not, particularly in the UK. And it's also related to the UK for free healthcare, though it's not exactly free. Not to the people who work, it isn't. But here is the kicker if you remove your strawman status, because it's my understanding those benefits afforded to you are no longer available unless they've changed a law recently. So this obtaining recognised sovereignty only becomes a useful goal should you gain access to your trust account created at birth, as only then do you have the funds to cover those eventualities and also the free health issue. Sovereignty declares you outside of the system, but as I understand, you don't retain or gain benefits from the system for the rest of your life. And it's something that people need to look into when applying for that status. You must gain access to your trust account to then fund your sovereign choice. Things that make you go, when you find out that the globalist company called Dell, the computer firm, who are third leading computer specialists after Lenovo and HP, reveals this piece. Michael Dell, who like Bill Gates had connections to IBM or IB Marduk, who have the Watson AI system. Now Gates got all his ideas from IBM, and Michael Dell sold IBM PC compatible computers until forming his own company called Dell Computer Corporation. But Dell works with agency-related goons. Listen closely to this piece. On November the 19th, 2015, Dell, alongside ARM Holdings, Cisco Systems, Intel, Microsoft and Princeton University, founded the Open Fog Consortium to promote interests and development in fog computing. Fog networking consists of a control plane and a data plane. For example, on the data plane, fog computing enables computing services to reside at the edge of the network as opposed to servers in a data center. Compared to cloud computing, fog computing emphasizes proximity to end users and client objectives. For example, operational costs, security policies, resource exploitation. Dense geographical distribution and context awareness for what concerns computational and IoT resources. IoT is Internet of Things. But what things? Latency reduction and backbone bandwidth savings to achieve better quality of service. And the fog networking supports the Internet of Things concept, in which most of the devices used by humans on a daily basis will be connected to each other. Fog networking, in which most of the devices used by humans on a daily basis will be connected to each other. Do people not ask, why is there now several references to us as humans is cropping up everywhere? What are they differentiating us from? Even Kim did it in a recent podcast, I'm told, referring to us as you humans. Why are they suddenly calling us humans? Perhaps we may find out soon. Examples include phones, wearable health monitoring devices, connected vehicle and augmented reality using devices, such as Google Glass or Google Glass. SPAWAR, S-P-A-W-A-R, a division of the US Navy, is prototyping and testing a scalable, secure, disruption-tolerant mesh network to protect strategic military assets, both stationary and mobile. Machine control applications running on the mesh nodes take over when the internet connectivity is lost. And use cases include Internet of Things, for example, smart drone swarms. Take note of that. ISO/IEC 20248 provides a method whereby the data of objects identified by edge computing using automated identification data carriers, AIDC, a barcode, second time we've mentioned that tonight, and or an RFID tag can be read, interpreted, verified and made available into the fog and on the edge when the AIDC tag has moved on. Perhaps I best repeat that last sentence again. It provides a method whereby the data of objects identified by edge computing, slightly outside, not based in data servers, using automated identification data carriers, a barcode and or RFID tag can be read, interpreted, verified and made available into the fog and on the edge even when the AIDC tag has moved on. All of this we warned of in the Clouds in Panic show. Everything is about tagging everything now. Data mining for the AI system to run the world. That's what they're planning. But then, when you find out this, Dell Remote Access Controller, a remote access card available in many models of Dell servers. You not worked it out yet? Dell Remote Access Controller, DRAC, or Draconian. Then you add this in and a picture emerges. Dynamic Relay Authorization Control, or DRAC for short, which is a daemon that dynamically updates a relay authorization map for send mail. Why have Dell, with their AI computers, got two anagrams of DRAC? But then when you look at the Dell logo with one letter fallen over, you are left with DLL, which is another computer term called Direct Link Library. The letter left fallen is the E, which E fell. When you add in Dell, which took over a popular PC gaming network in 2006 called Alienware, perhaps your pondering reaches deeper levels now. But with that knowledge and thinking mindset, perhaps this next piece has more meaning or makes more sense now. You decide after the break. That was last piece was kind of part one of 3 parts that will slightly bend your minds a bit and leave with deep pondering. And the first part is linked to this next piece, which I did run recently, but I'm going to run it again with extra bits added into it and a summing up of it. But perhaps a quick refresh of the last piece. Dell were connected to IBM, who have the Watson AI. They have fog networking on a control plane and a data plane. Fog computing enables them to reside at the edge of the network, not in it. And then they referred to us as by the term humans, who on a daily basis will be connected to each other by the fog network, using augmented reality devices, health monitoring devices, phones. The media talking about smart drone swarms and a barcode or RFID tag connected to the fog even when the automated identification data carriers are not there. And then you have Dell with the Dell Remote Access Controller, DRAC, the Dynamic Relay Authorization Control, DRAC, and they took over the gaming network called Alienware. So that's your recap. And like I said, I ran this piece recently, but I'm running it again with a deeper insight piece to ponder on. And it's called Debunking the Creator God. I didn't write this, but it was very interesting. The Creator God implies predestination. Predestination opposes free will, because free will requires individual decision making, and predestination requires everything that was done, is being done, and will be done in the hands of His creation. Predestination is an enemy of free will. A Creator God would have complete control over everything and is basically the script writer of their creation. This can be seen in computer programming, where the programmer is a god over his program. Take note of that as this unfolds. He can change whatever he deems fit without the program's consent, and all outcomes of the program are known facts as the program executes scripted commands created by the programmer. Hence, the past, present and future in the world of a Creator God has already been decided. Loops. And we, the alleged creation, have no control over its outcome. This makes the world seem mechanistic and dead, as we have no power and exist as mere automatons, or bots as we call it. Free will, on the other hand, is based on one's ability to make individual choices that we record as the past experience, manipulate as present decisions, and anticipate as the future. Hence, free will can only exist in a domain where the future is unknown and the past is inaccessible. The past is a known memory. It cannot become unknown or manipulated. And this is similar to the concepts behind the blockchain technology. As above, so below. And the writer says the Creator God is obviously an enemy of free will. The very thing none of us can oppose, as our very existence alone proves it. You cannot believe in free will and the Creator God. And the writer says the Creator God is a narcissist, complete control. Why is Creator God religions requite full submission? Submission, which means substitute mission. To believe or not to believe. The very fact that only you can make that decision for you should make free will an obviously irrefutable fact. In light of the first piece, that second piece is an interesting piece and thought concept to ponder on. The reference to the God being a computer programming brings up many connotations and makes one ponder on AI. Is everything just an AI overlay? And no, I don't believe we are a computer simulation, whereby our God, or even source, could well be an AI invention, which then explains the bot-like behaviour of many of his creations, does it not? And with the recent revelations that Source told the trustee to create an internet TV station, and also that dark doesn't exist and is an illusion, which has raised many concerns of the trustee. But for me, it raises more concerns from my perspective, not who received the message, but where did that message really come from? The last two parents, the twins, one of which is only appearing in here at times as a VI, virtual intelligence, it's not real. Our life force energy converted from coins to paper and now seemingly marching towards fresh air tokens. With a techno world on steroids lurking around the corner from us, it is something we should all think deeply upon. And forget whether you are religious or not, everything on this planet currently is about shortening time spans via genetics, technology, travel, or even conferences. But given the distances of travel and the main stargates down for speed of travel, it would be an easier way of controlling a planet and its beings from afar with the use of technology, would it not? AI gods and goddesses. Oh my. What a way to cheat death and not return to source. And all about staying alive at all costs to keep control. Is that what has really taken place in this solar system? All ones and zeros, and binary code, and not one-on-one with the one, which we had on some levels earlier this year, until someone decided to go 1-0-0. But the key is how to correct it, and that involves the all, not just the one. With some believing this creation is a simulation, it's not. But some aspects have that feel to it. And one has to ponder on our thoughts of what is source. So here is something I pondered on this week that adds to that piece. And it goes back to the one-on-one with the one, which plays out on multiple levels, not just the quantum system. Who or what is source? How do you access it? How widespread are people with access to it? The latter of which made me ponder. And you know what happens next. Now, we are all part of source. It is inside us all. You have to go within, not look up to the sky to access it. All of us have the capability to become a source for our own universe one day, providing your soul development has gone through the several levels of not only earth planes, but galactic and universal planes of development. And there are 7 planes of soul development at each level. Now, all God or gods in our books were everyday beings who had developed enough to attain what appears to some as magical abilities. Now, some of it was trickery, some of it was technology, but it was enough to fool the lower developed humans into believing they were the god or gods. But there are many humans globally who have some of these extraordinary godlike abilities. Some use it for good purposes and some fall to the dark alignments, and they end up losing their abilities, but then dance with the unseen entities to carry the illusion on. The dark magicians. The question to ponder on is, what if you cannot or struggle to gain access to a real source from a lower soul development level? I will repeat that again. What if you cannot or struggle to gain access to a real source or the real source from a lower soul development level? Many humans are astral level and have little to no extra abilities. What if the frequency those humans carry is too low to make the real frequency connection or spark to source? And what if those humans are then subject to an external source which they are told is in the sky and subsequently external of them? What if that level of soul development's connection to source is the sky? and the veil, which is an electromagnetic fence, is subsequently connected to the Saturn-Moon matrix frequency generator. And for those people, their God or source is actually an AI programmed to mimic source, but is not the real source. It's a bit like Project Bluebeam, where frequencies of light create a visual in the sky of an alien invasion. But to do that, you need a projection screen to make it realistic. What if the veil was that field of projection? And with the veil fallen, is that projection screen no longer available to Bluebeam to pull that off? People look up to the sky and pray, which frequency-wise generates a wave to then hit the veil. And the AI then mirrors a frequency back at you that people believe is God. This is similar to the voice-to-head technology used on channelers, ran largely by the Greys. That is an AI-based system, as the AI records all human activity, then mimics its behavioural pattern. Now, the fact that the last one went psychotic suggests many here were of the same status. Or was it interfered with? In the series 100, they had the AI down as Ali, which is pronounced as a lie. A-L-I-E. Which is bad enough. But also, if you anagram it, it may become more significant. Ali, or Ali, rearranged becomes L and AI. L, which means God, with AI. Maybe they told us all hidden in plain sight. So the question remains, can humans only connect to source via mental plane level development, which is blocked by a simulation level of traps called the astral, which contains an ultimate trap of mirroring being with God and peace called heaven? If you've experienced it, it's an absolutely fantastic experience full of bliss, harmony, and you feel at one with the universe. But I quickly learned that that was another of their astral simulation traps. I believe the astral is the simulation. And many reports in dreams and also daytime of being in a familiar place, but characters are out of place, buildings in wrong places also. That is the astral, which is in part a copy of the physical creation, but it's not exact. And this also explains the Mandela effect, as you dance between the two worlds at any given time, day or night, asleep or awake. Another way you can connect to source direct is with the ability to bilocate travel, not astral travel. The word astral travel is a spell cast. Astral travelling is word magic trap. You ask for astral travel, and that is where you end up. It's all about consent. You can travel anywhere, not just the astral level. But if you bilocate outside of the Mobius loop and subsequently outside of time, then your connection to source is direct and not getting pulled in by an AI overlay mimicking being God. By bilocating outside of the loop and time, you bypass the system known as the Matrix and become as one with the source original. Inside the Matrix, your God is time. Ponder on that deeply. A fairly final piece tonight, a fairly mind-bending concept, that last one. But grasping it makes much more sense than people think. Is God inside the Matrix, the AI, which is dictated by time? Me. And in essence, by praying to God with the electromagnetic AI overlay with the Saturn Moon Matrix and the veil, it's mirroring back what you asked for. That's all it can do. You ask it to save you, but you're asking it to save you in the Matrix. Ponder on that a bit more. We live in a world when what is real and what is illusion becomes mired in a mist of fog, so thick people can barely see. You clearing the fog of the old world is the key, and then teach others to do the same. We have to create our world, our ways, and in our image. The other world was not in our image, but theirs. The show tonight laid out why we have to build the TPC, create a new path, our own looking glass system whereby we don't look back and make predictions for the future. We, the people, create the future. The old line, build it and they will come, springs to mind. But we are not a restaurant club. We do not need the wait club and their waiters. The future of our species rests in our hands, and what we do today decides the future for the all. What is it to be? A transhumanistic, Orwellian techno world, or a vibrant, prosperous, caring and sharing world we can all be proud of? I will leave you tonight with 2 comments from the Aztec crash, and 1 from me. The EBE, extraterrestrial biological entity, said, 1. We have no government. We outlawed it, or rather, we outgrew it. That is the goal of the TPC. And 2, just try to accept we are in paradise when we are seeing and understanding something new. Our God should be change. Our religion should be understanding. Searching for truth is our greatest social challenge and purpose. And my final thing is, people only love God or gods when they've failed to remember their own connection to Source. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Happy pondering, and